Ibrahim Fakir, he is the head of governance at the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. Ibrahim Fakir, good morning to you.
Morning, Korani. Morning to you, listeners.
Thank you very much. You would have heard a little bit of what Mr. Mantashe says. He says there's leadership. He says we are sensationalizing on these matters. Is it simply a matter of sensationalizing, or is there legitimate expectation that these processes would have gone through without these kind of problems that are reported?
Well, I think problems are to be expected, Korani. I think, political process is often accompanied by a degree of competition, and when there's competition, there's obviously some degree of conflict. So, I'm not surprised that that has happened. I'm not surprised that is also true, because this is ultimately a political process. However, what Mr. Mantashe is saying is it appears as if he thinks this is a tolerable level of violence. He thinks it's a tolerable level of conflict. He thinks it's a tolerable level of competition. And I'm not convinced that is the case. Imagine an organization. So, sure, you can have leadership. Sure, you can have a leadership which is going to sort out the problems. But an organization, the very same organization, having two parallel conferences at the same time, that doesn't sound very competitive to me. That sounds sort of potentially and really, in fact, divisive, especially in the Northwest, where on Friday they're supposed to have two separate conferences. Now, how that happens in one organization, I'm not so sure.
I suppose, but he's got a responsibility. This is Mr. Mantashe to obviously keep things under control here and portray an image of it's not a crisis, it's manageable still.
Well, I think it appears as if they have managed it to a degree. There are some people who are complaining that they weren't allowed to be part of the process in the Northwest. And I suspect, as in contrast to the previous Secretary General, at least this one appears to be acting and taking these matters in hand and trying to resolve them. Now, whether they are resolvable, especially in a province like the Western Cape, where this is broken down at the provincial executive level, and in Limpopo, where I don't know how they're going to solve that problem. Of course, we'll have to see what happens. But at least someone that is taking responsibility and focusing on the issues. But I think if I were the ANC, I wouldn't be this sanguine. I wouldn't be this easygoing about this, because it is suggestive of a level of division that is so polarizing and so exclusionary that it appears as if one section of the ANC, who, if you don't appear to be of like mind, then you simply don't have a space to be able to voice yourself.
That's an interesting point, perhaps, to pick up this argument now in the newspapers this morning about, backroom machinations and people trying to ensure that the Deputy President, for instance, remains in the top six of the ANC. Yet, on the other hand, in an interview with the Business Day, he's reported this morning to have said that he will never be part of any arrangement that is done pre-conference.
Well, there's something quite confusing going on at all levels, and it's difficult to unravel, and I'm not sure the ANC can explain itself very easily out of it. And there are two things at play here. The one is that, yes, you can't appear to suggest that you want ordinary delegates and ordinary members of the ANC to have a voice. And then you say, well, if their voice is something we don't like and we don't like too much, then we're going to try and get some backroom deals to ensure that there's some other outcome which is acceptable to all of us. So that's the first problem. You're not entirely then saying that ordinary members have as much of a voice as you claim they have. That's the first point. The second is that if you look at the nominations processes, they are so polarizing and they're so exclusive that if you are nominated for a position, and one camp thinks that you are nominated, to someone else is nominated for the same position, then they believe that that same person should not be nominated for any other position. That means that they're not willing to accommodate them politically in any event. Now, that makes a mockery of the very rules of the ANC, and it makes a mockery of the rules in the sense that you can't be saying, on the one hand, everyone is entitled to contest for an election, and when they actually play by the rules as Deputy President Motlanthe appears to be doing, then you seem to suggest, well, you'll be punished even though you are prepared to stand and are prepared to play by the rules. So they've got to decide whether the rules are appropriate, whether they want competition, and whether they're allowing people to contest. Now, look, I agree that it would be quite disabling for the ANC to see that this individual is left out and those people who support him are completely left out of all positions. I agree that it would be problematic. The problem is how they resolve it is a different question. And for me, there's one tragedy here. The tragedy is that the question that's been asked, and maybe appropriately so to a limited degree, is the sense that what is good for the ANC? How do we keep the ANC stable?
Sure.
Now, of course, that's good because, a stable ANC is good for society as overall. But the reality is that what's good for the ANC is not always good for society. And I think that these delegates have to start exercising their minds about what is good for society and what is good for South Africa as a whole, not just so narrowly and shallowly what is good for the ANC.